I'm a monster. Monster, monster, I'm a monster. Monster, monster, I'm a monster. I'm a
See me
monster.
slide, see me, hey.
Mother, you gotta let that man be the authority.
Those who knew the Schatz family were more stunned than anyone the morning of February 6th. Their home seemed to be the picture of loving happiness. But once investigators looked deeper, the picture became clearer. And it appears to have ties to this book, a copy of which was found inside the Schatz home.
If he screams too hard with the first five, gets hysterical, wait. You know, a little psychological terror is sometimes more effective than the pain. We had a kid there in the church who kept coming, had these black spots all over his head. Just kept Still got a bad attitude. Get up. I'm going to say, if you're still crying, I'm going to give you something to cry about.
In 2006, Lynn Paddock sought Christian advice on how to discipline her growing brood of adopted children. She found literature by a minister and his wife who recommended using plumbing supply lines to spank misbehaving children. She ordered Michael and Debbie Pearl's book to train up a child. This was the beginning of 4-year-old Sean Paddock's abuse and one of many children's deaths from parents who followed the advice from this book. Hello, my name is Holly. This is Simon. Welcome to the Murder She Said. Today we're going to discuss 3 known child cases in which a book contributed to their death. Just make sure you smash that subscribe button in order to hear rarely discussed true crime cases right from my little she shed. Also, I have a new channel called Strange She Shed where I can just be, well, strange, my weird self. And I will leave a link to that channel in the comments if you would like to go check that channel out. Sean Paddock was born in turmoil, early and tiny, to a broken family. Sean and his siblings' father went to prison after he was sentenced for essaying Sean's sister. The children's mother lost custody after she refused to leave their father. Social workers fretted over how to protect the little boy. They finally recruited new parents to raise him. Those parents, Johnny and Lynn Paddock, would adopt him. Lynn Paddock followed a boyfriend in hopes of a job to Raleigh in the late 1980s. She hauled heavy baggage, a turbulent childhood, 2 failed marriages, and addiction to alcohol. In 1989, she ended up at an Alcohol Anonymous meeting in Raleigh, North Carolina, ready to get clean. There she met Johnny Paddock, a young father also trying to wean himself off alcohol. Within a few months, Lynn moved in with Johnny and his infant daughter, Jessie. By 1990, they would be married. They wanted a playmate for Jessie, but Lynn was not able to get pregnant. One day, as the Paddocks ate at a Wendy's restaurant, a placemat caught her attention. On it, Wendy's founder, Dave Thomas, urged customers to adopt older foster children. They would end up adopting 6 children, one of those being Sean Paddock. They moved into a small farmhouse in Johnston County, North Carolina. The family shared a single bathroom in the 1,200 square foot home. They hoped to finish the attic and convert it into a bedroom. Sean was adopted in 2004 by the Paddocks when he was just 3 years old. Before Sean was adopted, after his first visit to the Paddocks' home, he came back to his then foster home with a bruise on his buttocks. Sean told his foster mom that he had petted the family dog and Lynn had hit him. The caseworker asked Lynn what had caused the bruising. She responded by saying that she had put Sean down for a nap and he had just simply fell out of bed. Satisfied with that answer, the adoption was finalized, unfortunately for Sean. The adoption agency had a no-hitting policy that the Paddocks did sign. The Paddocks received $2,200 a month in state subsidies for adopting the children. Johnny worked long hours at his carpet cleaning business while Lynn cared for and homeschooled their children. Lynn found the book To Train Up a Child, wrote by Michael and Debbie Pearl, at a homeschool conference, and it became her discipline Bible. Lynn and Johnny both thought that they needed more control over their children. Lynn began whipping them with a thin, flexible pipe Pearl suggested in his book as a good substitute for the rod described in supposedly the Old Testament. Pearl's method includes switching infants with a willow tree branch and older children with belts and shrub cuttings and thin, flexible pipes. The little girls were made to wear ankle-length dresses or skirts, and the whole family attended church together. The children were not allowed to watch television. Lynn wanted complete obedience from her children. One form of discipline when they got out of line was to be forced to jump up and down on a small trampoline until they were so tired they would just eventually collapse. Another form of discipline that was learned from the book is called blanket training. A blanket is spread out on the floor and the child is made to sit on this blanket and told not to get off the blanket. If they try to get off the blanket, the child would be hit. Lynn would make them also face the wall while sitting on the blanket for sometimes hours in a day. Lynn also would make her children eat vomit and feces as discipline. Sometimes the children were not allowed to talk and also forced to eat off the floor, and at times they would lose the privilege of being able to get up and walk to the bathroom when they had to go. How miserable is that? They were also made to drink lots of water and had to wear diapers. The children were being hit with a spoon, switch, belt, or PVC pipe every day, and also a hammer would be thrown at them. The longer the child cried, the harder Lynn would hit. At times, Lynn would place duct tapes over one of her children's nose and mouth, causing suffocation, and also she would confine a child to bed for at least 4 days without food. She would do this by wrapping her children in blankets at night so they couldn't leave the bed until she wanted them to. Her adopted 8-year-old daughter was the first to be bound this way. Karen was bound with her arms by her side and her legs together and wrapped extremely tight inside of a blanket. Lynn further immobilized her by placing a shelf over the little girl's legs so that she could not roll over. Sean started to get this treatment after he got out of bed one night. Sean began showing signs of anxiety from having his mouth taped with duct tape and being forced to sit or lie underneath furniture, including a couch and a bed in the attic. Sean's entire head was wrapped in duct tape on more than one occasion to keep him quiet at night. How suffocating would that be? I can't even imagine what a miserable life that must have been. Then on February 26, 2006, paramedics were called to the home in response to Lynn saying that her son was not breathing. Lynn's story was that she had gone in to check on her son Sean at about 3:30 a.m. and he was just fine. Returning to check on him again at 7 a.m., she found him stiff, grabbed him up, carried him downstairs, and yelled for one of the children to call 911. Johnny came inside and tried to do CPR on Sean, but Sean was already gone. Paramedics arrived and took Sean to Johnston Memorial Hospital, where he was pronounced dead. Sean had bruises on his back and bottom, though those were not the injuries which had actually killed Sean. It was discovered that in the weeks leading up to his death, Sean had been wrapped tightly in blankets to restrain him and keep him from getting up as a punishment. Sean had suffocated to death while being restrained this way. For 5 nights in a row, Sean bucked, screamed, and spit in her face as she wrapped him tightly in those blankets until the night he finally died. In Sean's final days as a 4-year-old, he had started walking with a limp because of all the beatings he had to bear. Lynn Paddock was sentenced to life without the possibility of parole, and she blamed social services for Sean's death. Wasn't her fault. She said that social services gave her children that had lots of emotional issues and that other families didn't want them. She claimed she was given more than she could even bear. Johnny Paddock got off on all charges. They claimed that there was not enough evidence to charge him of any wrongdoing. While there is some argument whether Sean Paddock's death could have been from the advice of the book because of the cause of death, there can be no doubt that 7-year-old Lydia Schatz' death was caused by methods used in this book. Kevin and Elizabeth Schatz, who were devout Christians, had 6 biological children in addition to their 3 adopted children and lived in Paradise, Washington. But believe me, this house was far from being a paradise. The 3 adopted children were from Africa. The 7 and 11-year-old girls were sisters, and they also adopted a 3-year-old. Neighbors described the California couple as loving and devout.
It was that love and caring that prompted the Schatz less than 3 years earlier to welcome 3 Liberian orphan girls into their home and hearts.
This is Princess Nanfor, and she's 8 years old.
The entire family shared their joy with Action News just days before their adopted daughters joined the family.
For us, this was a perfect match because we could adopt 3.
The couple followed No Greater Joy Ministries online. The pastor of that church is none other than Michael and his wife Debbie Pearl, who are the authors of this same book called How to Train Up a Child. The children were all homeschooled, and their parents went by the philosophy of spare the rod, spoil the child. They believed, like the book stated, that you should break a child's self-will. The rod in this case happened to be a 15-inch long of 1/4 inch plumbing supply line. A number of these rods were placed all around the house for easy access. The children called these rods spankers or stingrays. If Kevin or Elizabeth suspected the children of lying, they would make them put homemade soap in their mouths for an hour, and then after the soap was taken out, they couldn't rinse for another 10 minutes. 7-year-old Lydia was by her parents to be the most strong-willed of the children. She and her 11-year-old sister were punished at times and were only given rice or potatoes for extended lengths of time. Lydia was forbidden to talk the last few months of her life because her parents believed she was just bad influence on the other children. She also wasn't allowed to look at the other children. During this time, Lydia also developed a urinary tract infection, and it was left untreated. Because of this, she just began to urinate on herself. It was a bitter cold January, and because Lydia was urinating on herself, she was forced to sleep in a sleeping bag on the patio and was given a tarp to cover with so she could keep the rain and snow off her. How nice was that? Give her a tarp. January, guys. January. I mean, I can't imagine this little girl staying out like that all night. I don't even allow my dogs out at night. I can't imagine putting my child out there. Lydia was put in diapers while on the patio, and because she urinated in them, she would be hosed off by the garden hose in the bitter cold before being let back in the house. Lydia was getting hit by the rod in the last few months up to 3 and 4 times a day by her father towards the end. On February 4th, 2010, while reading, Lydia pronounced a word wrong. Her father corrected her, and when she still got it wrong, Lydia was taken into her parents' bedroom and punished with the stingray. While Lydia's father was hitting her with the pipe, she started squirming, and so Kevin just sat on her back and buttocks to try to make her quit wiggling. Then he continued to beat her. Her father beat Lydia all night long. The only breaks were when her father got a drink or went to the bathroom. Sometime during the night, Lydia asked if she could just take a break so she could pray. Basically, she thought as an excuse that she could not get beat during that time. He gave her a short break, and then he just went back to beating the little girl. Later the next day, Lydia noticed blood coming from her private area, and she was told by her parents that it was her first monthly. Later, though, it was determined it was from medical injuries, but the report does not go into detail what caused that. The beatings continue off and on for 2 more days. On February 6, 2010, at approximately 1 a.m., Elizabeth called 911 seeking medical assistance for Lydia, stating that she had stopped breathing.
Oh, yeah.
She's swallowed a lot of
vomit. Couldn't figure out what was going on. She was like really tired, and her vision was blurry.
Come on, baby.
Lydia passed away after an attempt to save her life at the hospital. After a nurse turned Lydia over, she observed all the marks on this little girl from being beat to death. Her 11-year-old sister was also put in the hospital after police had went to the family's home and observed her limping. The authorities asked her to lift her nightgown, and they observed marks all over the little girl's legs. Her buttocks was bleeding so bad that the underwear she was wearing was stuck to the wounds.
Where do you get splintered? Just on the arms and the back?
On my bottom and on my back last night, and underneath my feet.
Underneath your feet? Sorry, I'd like to take you to the hospital. Okay?
I probably need to bring a pot because I might throw up again.
The parents were immediately arrested. Lydia was beaten so much that her muscles had broke down, leading to muscle fibers entering her bloodstream, which caused kidney failure. Usually this only happens like during bombings, something that's a really big impact, not being beat to death by your parents. So basically, after the kidney failure, further complications of an overload of potassium in the blood caused her to go into cardiac arrest. By the time Lydia's sister got to the hospital, she was going into kidney failure too. but the hospital staff was able to save her life. Kevin is serving 22 years of a 2-life sentence for second-degree murder and torture. His wife Elizabeth is serving 13 years for voluntary manslaughter and corporal injury on a child. This leads us to the death of 13-year-old Hana Grace Rose Williams, who was tortured and held in a 4x2 closet, all because her parents decided to follow the teaching of Pearl's book. And to me, this may be the worst of the three. Although they're all terrible, Hana's story is really tough to hear. At the tender age of 11, Hana arrived in Washington hoping to find a family that would love her. She had had a rough start in life in Ethiopia. Her mother disappeared and her father died, and she was placed in an orphanage. She arrived in Washington with another little 8-year-old deaf boy because both of them were going to be adopted by Larry and Carrie Williams. The couple already had 6 biological children. Hana could not speak English very well when she first arrived. Hana had come to the Williams family with ringworm, cold sores, parasites, and hepatitis B. Although the family was aware of her condition prior to adoption, she was closely monitored when she used the bathroom and was not allowed to touch anything before washing her hands. Early post-adoption reports from the first year from social workers who visited the Williams home in the first 6 months stated Emmanuel, the 8-year-old deaf child, was learning to sign with his new siblings. Hana was reading Little House on the Prairie. Medical charts show Hana had started growing from a slightly underweight 77 pounds when she first arrived to a plump 105 pounds 6 months later. So at first, things were good, but they were being monitored too. But after June 2009, there's no evidence of further doctor's visits and no more post-adoption reports as the Williams stopped sending in the updates that they had agreed to provide, but which were not required by law. From the start, Carrie Williams told a group of friends that she was angry that Hana was not as young as she expected. Carrie had confessed to a local knitting group that she had expected to adopt a little girl, not a half-grown woman. When members suggested she reach out to the adoption agency, Carrie said, "I don't wish her on anyone." And she added if they could kick Hana out when she turned 18, that she was confident they could train Emmanuel to obey. Hana started her monthly soon after arriving in Washington, which disgusted Carrie. When Hana first arrived from Ethiopia, she slept in a bedroom with her sisters that would soon change as Carrie continued to feel disgusted by Hana. After Hana first came to the Williams, she began to gain weight, so Carrie began calling her fat and started decreasing her intake of food. Larry began to give sermons in the backyard. Carrie, who had married at 19, went from wearing pants to just skirts or dresses and didn't believe that women should wear swimsuits or vote. They also homeschooled the children and forced the girls to wear dresses. If Hana argued with Carrie about the clothes she picked out, she was made to wear nothing but a towel, and sometimes she had to go barefoot. Hana's braided hair, of which she was very proud of, was shaved off 3 times, once for cutting the grass too short. At some point, 8-year-old Emmanuel started to get abused too. Hana and Emmanuel were both fed different meals than the biological children were. Cold leftovers topped with frozen vegetables or sandwiches deliberately soaked with water, which they called wet sandwiches. Sounds good. There were times that Hana and Emmanuel would miss up to 2 meals a day and were not allowed to sit at the table with the family. They often had to take their plates and eat on the patio. Friends and neighbors began to notice that Hana was excluded, trailing behind the family if they went out for a neighborhood walk or just lingering at the edge of the driveway while the other children were playing. Carrie began instructing her eldest sons to beat Hana when she deemed Hana to be defiant. Carrie also used the 1/4-inch plastic plumbing as suggested by Michael Pearl. The physical punishment at times included beating Hana on the bottom of her feet, a treatment her brother Emmanuel experienced and described as very painful. When Carrie and Larry caught Hana stealing food, they forced her to sleep outside in a barn. For a 2-week period in the fall of 2010, they locked Hana in a shower room at night without access to a toilet. For the last 6 months of Hana's life, Carrie and Larry locked her into a small closet every night. Hana had to remain in this closet until either Larry or Carrie let her out, and she had no ability to turn on the light while inside because the switch was on the outside of this closet. When Carrie locked Hana inside this small 4x2 closet during the daytime, she played an audio book of the Bible because, according to Carrie, she was trying to get Hana's brain to think differently. Larry and Carrie also made Hana use an outhouse behind the barn and wash her hands and shower outside in the backyard. It would not permit her to use any of the 3 indoor bathrooms in the home. Carrie began imposing this punishment in the summer of 2010 because Hana had hepatitis and Carrie suspected she was deliberately smearing blood from her monthlies on the bathroom walls and door. Hana was also washed off with the garden hose outside because they felt she was very unclean. Carrie's physical punishment followed Hana to the backyard. Carrie forced Hana to engage in punishments she and the children called walking the line in boot camp. Walking the line involved forcing Hana to walk the perimeter of an outdoor pickleball court in the backyard. Boot camp involves extra chores, usually outdoors, and sometimes involved just stacking and restacking the same pile of rocks. Hana underwent boot camp at least once or twice a week in the last 6 months of her life. When both Emmanuel and Hana were outside being disciplined, they were not allowed to have jackets, and sometimes shoes were even taken from them, unless it was snowing out. How kind, huh? They also were punished by not getting blankets and pillows at night. On May 11, 2011, it began as a typical day for the Williams family. While the children emerged from their bedrooms, Carrie let Hana out of the locked closet. Then, before heading to Boeing, where Larry worked, he made breakfast for the family. Hana and Emmanuel took their plates to the patio. After breakfast, the children cleaned up the kitchen, did their chores, and went outside to play. The children played Capture the Flag that morning. Hana, who was wearing a t-shirt and sweatpants, was outside but did not participate. Larry left for work around noon. The children typically ate lunch between 2 or 3 p.m. Carrie escorted Hana to the outhouse before lunch. She then gave Hana her lunch, a wet sandwich, around 3 p.m. While the other children came in to eat, Hana was forced to eat and stay outside. Carrie allegedly told Hana to come inside a little after 8 because it started drizzling, but according to Carrie, she refused. Carrie escorted Hana to the outhouse a third time around 8:30 p.m., but this time Carrie saw Hana just throw herself down on the ground. Carrie stated that Hana took a few steps and then lunged forward, landing on her hands and knees. She further stated that Hana did this repeatedly before and after using the outhouse. Carrie also saw Hana repeatedly hit her forehead on the back patio, according to Carrie. At that point, Carrie chose to leave Hana outside because she just couldn't watch it anymore. After Carrie returned inside, she saw Hana continue to throw herself around for another 20 to 30 minutes. Carrie noticed by this time that Hana had skinned her elbows and knees and had a knot on her forehead. Carrie claims she sent her oldest son outside to bring Hana inside, but she also instructed him to spank Hana with the plastic switch and to force Hana to do exercises like jumping jacks or sit squats to keep warm. Hana began exercising as he instructed, but when she stopped, Carrie sent her next eldest son to do the same thing. Her son spanked Hana with the plastic switch too and ordered her to do sit squats. Again, Hana complied for about a minute, then stopped. Finally, Carrie sent her third oldest son outside to repeat the beatings. Carrie admitted that she wanted Hana to do exercise, she said, to keep warm, like she was worried about her health or something. Obviously, we know that's a lie. Carrie claimed that she then took Hana her dinner outside. Carrie said Hana did not eat the food. Hana brought the fork to her mouth as if she was going to take a bite, but then put the fork back down. In a written statement to police, one of Carrie's sons said that Hana was leaning over the table and was unable to eat. After 5 minutes, Carrie took Hana's dinner plate away and moved it into the house. Carrie said at some point she attempted to carry Hana inside, but Hana went limp, so she then ordered her 2 oldest sons to carry Hana inside. Carrie told the boys to first don latex gloves and to remove Hana's shoes and socks because they were soggy from dripping water and Hana's blood. Carrie said Hana was so bloody and her clothes was so wet from walking in the rain that the water dripping down had made the blood drip down all over her shoes. And she wanted them removed before Hana came inside, because all she was worried about is if she'd get a disease. She didn't care that her little girl was dying. Hey, she hated this little girl. She cared nothing about her. They removed Hana's shoes and socks and threw them in the garbage. Hana started taking off her clothes, which most people would recognize as a sign of hypothermia. Carrie went outside and saw Hana sitting buck naked from the waist down. Carrie told her sons to go back inside and to forget it because modesty is important in our family. Carrie took a set of dry clothes to Hana, told her to get out of her wet clothes, returned back inside, and turned the patio light off, leaving Hana in the dark. Carrie checked on Hana twice, turning on and off the patio light each time. At some point, she thought Hana had begun changing into the dry clothes. Hana was then left in the cold, bloody, wet, and naked 2 additional hours. At midnight, Larry called Carrie and told her he was heading home from work, and Carrie let Larry know how defiant Hana had been. While looking through the window, one of the children noticed Hana was face down on the patio and was not moving. Carrie then went outside to find Hana with her face halfway on the concrete and half on the grass, and her mouth full of dirt from having her face fall into a molehill just off the patio. Hana was cold to her touch. Carrie rolled her over and could see that it wasn't good. She ran inside to grab a sheet from the linen closet to cover Hana for modesty, and then carried her inside with the help of one of her boys. After laying Hana on the floor inside, she realized Hana did not have a pulse. She called Larry, who instructed she call 911. After Larry got home, they performed CPR with the help of the 911 operator.
What was your emergency?
Yes, I think my daughter just killed herself.
Why do you say that?
She's really rebellious, and she's been outside refusing to come in, and she's been throwing herself all around, and then she collapsed.
After taken to the hospital, Hana was pronounced dead. Her autopsy results showed due to malnutrition, Hana would be more susceptible to hypothermia because she would have insufficient insulating fat under the skin to keep the body warm in a cool environment. The final cause of death was then hypothermia. Hana had contusions and lumps on her forehead, bruises and abrasions on her hips, knees, and shins, and red streaks on her thighs. She was bleeding from multiple areas of her body due to the beatings. At the time of her death, her weight was down to 78 pounds, which was a loss of almost 30 pounds. Larry Williams was sentenced to 27 years and 9 months, and Carrie was sentenced to 37 years.
Or think about the possibility that she was falling down because she was starving, right?
No, she told me that she did it on purpose. She was stealing junk food and sweet. That's my testimony. Don't change it.
And that's not food?
That's not food that's necessary for healthy living.
But my question had to do with food generally. You're differentiating sweets from food?
Yes, I am.
Okay. Now that we've got that terminology right, she went from the barn to the shower room because she was stealing sweets.
That is correct.
And she was locked in the shower room at night because she was stealing sweets.
Correct. 14.
And then she had to go from the shower room to the nursery, right?
I believe so, yes.
And then she had to go from the nursery to the closet, right?
Yes, that's correct.
After Lydia's death, Michael Pearl released a statement saying that he laughed at his critics of this book to train up a child. He concluded his lengthy, mocking statement with the following: "Even my chickens are laughing. Well, actually, it is more like cackling because they just laid another organic egg for my breakfast, and they know it was the same piece of 1/4 inch plastic supply line that trained the dogs not to eat the chickens." Throughout Michael's book, To Train Up a Child, he offers dozens of examples on the appropriate use of force when training a child, beginning with infants.
I'm trying to inflict a small amount of pain. I'm armed. On the surface of the skin.
That really
like
hurts.
It's supposed to.
That really hurts.
That'll teach you not to say
if
false
I were
things
a child,
on air.
I would be pissed.
They'll teach you not to say false things on air.
I would not like you if you hit me with that if you were my dad. I would be confused.
I could parade 3.5 million children in front of you right now who tell you the joys and the beauty of being raised by parents who love them enough to
because if they don't say
boundaries.
that, you're going to whack them. How old should you start hitting a child with that kind of a really hurt?
Supposed to.
Right.
They'll teach you not to push your cereal bowl off in the floor.
How old should I be when I'm being hit with this thing?
We do not spank children that are without reason. In other words, a child must have reason.
How old do you start?
But we do condition children when they're very young, just like you would condition an animal. For instance, if a child is 9 months old and he pushes his cereal bowl off in the floor, now the first thing you'd say is no, and you'd place the bowl back. But if you see a defiance in him, an act of rebellion, not just clumsiness, and he's shoving the bowl off the floor, then you would take your little instrument, which would probably be a wooden spoon or a spatula or something lying on the table, and you just hit him across the knuckles enough so that he pulls his hand back. Now, you're not inflicting a great deal of pain.
Do you think that's how dog trainers tell you to teach dogs? You think that's the technique they use to train dogs?
I've trained a lot of dogs, animals, cows.
One particular painful experience of nursing mothers is biting the baby. He says, my wife did not waste time finding a cure. When the baby bit, she pulled the baby's hair. Understand the baby is not being punished, just conditioned. After the baby's 2 or 3 times of biting and you keep pulling its hair and its head hurt, the child programs that information away from its own comfort. The biting habit is cured before it starts. This is not discipline. It is obedience training, he said. And think about it. He's referring to a newborn baby that doesn't know what. When you're pulling its hair, it doesn't understand, oh, I'm doing something wrong, I should stop. It's a newborn baby. It just cries. Michael also states in his book, a child properly and timely spanked is healed in the soul and restored to wholeness of spirit. A child can be turned back from the road to hell through proper spankings. He means beating. Then he adds, any spanking to effectively reinforce instruction must cause pain. At times in the book, he refers to a child as a dog. One statement he writes is disheartening to see your child with no more sense than a useless mutt, saved from the dog pound's gas chamber. Unthankful, selfish, self-centered, pouty, and downright mean-spirited. Another statement refers to the pipe that was used on every one of these abused children. A swift swat with a light, flexible instrument will sting without bruising or causing internal damage. Many people are using a section of 1/4 inch plumber's supply line as a spanking instrument. It will fit in your purse or hang around your neck. You can buy them for under $1 at Home Depot or any hardware store. They come cheaper by the dozen and can be widely distributed in every room and vehicle. Just the high profile of their accessibility keeps the kids in line, he says. A proper spanking leaves children without breath to complain.
You explain to him that what he's done is violent and that that's not acceptable in society and it's not acceptable in our home. Then I would take him somewhere like into his bedroom and I would tell him I'm going to give him 15 licks.
With what?
Probably a belt. A kid that big, a boy, I'd probably use a belt. It'd be handy. I might use a wooden spoon or a piece of like plumbing supply line.
Pearl's methods include making children who are challenged with potty training take cold baths, denying food to disobedient children, and whipping them with instruments other than the hand. Pearl sees nothing wrong with applying his techniques to infants. DEBI Pearl also wrote a book called Created to Be His Helpmeet. At one point in the book, DEBI Pearl encourages a young mother whose husband routinely beats her and threatens to kill her with a kitchen knife to stop blabbering about his sins and win him back by showing him more respect. Sudden aggressive outbursts are part of what it means to be a man, according to Pearl. The wisest way to handle the aggressive husband is by not taking personal offense, she advises. Avoid provoking him. It seems the Pearls believe that a wife should submit to her husband, even if it means her death, and presumably the death of her children.
How do you handle a father who will not take his part in discipline? When he does discipline, it's out of anger.
Make love to him. If your husband is an angry man, make love. Get rid of his frustration. Make him happy. All right, another question. Sweetie pie.
When using the rod as a training tool, how hard should the reinforcement be?
What? Another guy wrote me, he had two kids, 12 and 13 years old, that were fussing and fighting. He made them hold hands and run across the street to the other side, touch the house on the other side and come back. They got outside and hid in the bushes holding hands. Now that might not be too strange in San Francisco, but that'd be real weird where they live.
The Pearls, along with their grown children, still have a YouTube channel to this very day and still deny any wrongdoing or any responsibility for any child abuse or death.
The idea of spanking a child into submission is not something I've taught. That's something the media wants us to teach. And so they try to communicate that idea that we're going around with a rod trying to train our kids, beating on them all the time. Nothing in our material says that. That's total fabrication by the media.
Punish him with the rod severely. That's what you do to screamers around here. If you have fun, it'll be a lot easier training. You get 5 licks for being mean, you get 5 more for lying. You're going to see who's lying.
What do you think? What is your opinion? Do you think that his advice has caused the abuse and death of many children? All right, me and Simon are freezing. We do love y'all. And we hope y'all have a great day. But we're going in because we're freezing our butt off. And see y'all later. Hopefully sooner than later. Bye. Maybe not if it stays cold. Love y'all. Bye.
Master, 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 master.
Something like the Loch Ness got you shook as too cold, baby. I'm too bold, baby. Can't stop this. And now you know, baby, I'ma roll, baby, and leave a trail of blood, bodies and bones. Make them go crazy. No, they don't hate me, but now they know that you put